The night Evelyn Mercer aimed a rifle at the most dangerous man in Montana, her hands wouldn't stop shaking, not from fear, but from the terrifying realization that she'd finally found something worth dying for. Welcome to tonight's story. If you stay until the end, you'll discover how a broken schoolteacher from Boston became the woman who changed an entire frontier valley. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let's begin. The stagecoach lurched over another rut in the frozen road, and Evelyn Mercer's head cracked against the wooden frame hard enough to make her vision blur. She didn't cry out, hadn't cried out for anything in months. The two other passengers, a whiskey drummer with tobacco-stained teeth and an older woman clutching a carpet bag like it contained the crown jewels, had stopped trying to make conversation somewhere around the Wyoming border. Evelyn preferred it that way. Conversation required energy she didn't have, optimism she'd lost, and a future she no longer believed in. Through the gap in the canvas cover, she watched Montana's landscape roll past in shades of white and gray. March 1886, and winter still had its teeth sunk deep into the high country. The mountains rose like broken knuckles against a sky the color of old pewter. Everything looked hostile. Everything looked like it wanted her dead. Perfect. She pressed her forehead against the cold wood and closed her eyes, trying not to think about Boston, trying not to remember Thomas Whitmore's face when he'd returned her engagement ring across the table at Parker's restaurant, his voice so calm, so reasonable, explaining that a man in his position couldn't marry a woman whose father had died in debtor's prison. That society had rules that she should understand. She'd understood perfectly. Understood that 3 years of courtship meant nothing against the weight of scandal. Understood that her teaching position at Miss Caroline's Academy for Young Ladies had evaporated the moment her father's creditors started circling. Understood that Boston's drawing rooms had collectively decided Evelyn Mercer no longer existed. So she'd stopped existing there. The advertisement had been small, tucked between notices for patent medicines and farm equipment in the back of the Boston Globe. Teacher wanted. Remote Montana ranch. Room, board, $20 monthly. Suitable for single woman of good character seeking fresh prospects. Inquire Wade Callahan, Red Hollow, Montana Territory. $20. Enough to survive, maybe. Enough to disappear. Definitely. She'd written the letter that same night, packed her trunk the next morning, and boarded the train west before anyone who mattered could ask questions, before she could lose her nerve, before the weight of what she was running from could drag her under completely. The stagecoach driver's shout cut through her thoughts. Red Hollow, 20 minutes. The whiskey drummer leaned forward, grinning. First time in Red Hollow, miss. Evelyn nodded. Rough country. You got people waiting? Employment. What kind? Teaching. The old woman made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. Teaching what? Ain't no school in Red Hollow. Closest thing's over in Billings, 40 miles north. Evelyn's stomach dropped. I was hired by a Mr. Callahan. For his children. The silence that followed was worse than any answer. The drummer's grin faded. Wade Callahan? Yes. Jesus Christ. He sat back hard enough to make the bench creak. Lady, you know who Wade Callahan is? A rancher, a widower with children who need education. He's a son of a bitch with a temper that'd make the devil himself cross the street. Runs the biggest spread in the valley, and don't let nobody forget it. His wife died 4, maybe 5 years back. Left him with 2 kids and a disposition like a wounded grizzly. The old woman leaned in conspiratorially. They say he killed 3 men over a property dispute back in '83. Shot them all before they could clear leather. They say lots of things, Evelyn said quietly. Most of them aren't true. You willing to bet your life on that? Evelyn looked out at the approaching town, if you could call it that. A dozen buildings hunched against the wind like they were ashamed to be there. I already have. Red Hollow didn't improve upon closer inspection. The main street was frozen mud-rutted deep enough to swallow a wagon wheel. The buildings looked like someone had thrown them up in a hurry and never bothered to fix what broke. Saloon, general store, blacksmith, boarding house with half its shutters hanging crooked. Everything worn down and used up, like the whole town was just waiting for permission to die. The stage rolled to a stop in front of a building optimistically labeled Hotel. Evelyn climbed down carefully, her legs stiff from 3 days of travel, her dress wrinkled beyond salvation. The wind hit her immediately, sharp and mean, carrying the smell of wood smoke and horse manure. The driver hauled her trunk down with a thud. "You sure about this, miss? Stage heads back to Billings day after tomorrow if you change your mind." "I won't, thank you." He tipped his hat, but his expression said he'd already started forgetting her face. People did that with women like her. Women who weren't pretty enough to remember or important enough to matter. The hotel's interior was dark and smelled like old grease and older tobacco. A man behind the counter looked up from a week-old newspaper, his face registering surprise that quickly shifted to something else. Calculation, maybe. Or pity. "Help you? I'm looking for Wade Callahan. I was told to inquire here upon arrival." The man's eyebrows went up. "You the teacher?" "Yes, Evelyn Mercer." "He expecting you today?" "I sent a telegram from Billings 3 days ago." The man scratched his jaw, making a sound like sandpaper on wood. "Callahan don't come to town much, especially not in winter. You got a room reserved?" "No, I assumed—" "Yeah, well." He pulled a key from a board behind him. "Room 3, 75 cents a night. Callahan will probably send someone tomorrow, maybe the day after, if the pass is snowed in." Evelyn's remaining money amounted to $3.40. She counted out exact change, trying not to let him see her hands shake. Room 3 was exactly what 75 cents bought. A narrow bed with a mattress that sagged like a hammock. A washstand with a cracked basin. A window so dirty she couldn't tell if it was still snowing or not. She sat on the bed and it groaned ominously. She didn't cry. She'd promised herself no more crying back in Boston, standing in her empty apartment after the landlord had changed the locks. Tears were expensive. Tears required the luxury of believing things could get better. Instead, she unpacked her second dress, shook out what wrinkles she could, and tried to remember why she'd thought Montana was a good idea. The knock came at dawn. Evelyn jerked awake, disoriented, her neck screaming from the angle she'd fallen asleep at. Gray light leaked around the edges of the filthy window. The knock came again, harder. "Miss Mercer?" She stood, straightened her dress as much as possible, and opened the door. The boy in the hallway looked about 14, all sharp angles and suspicious eyes. Tall for his age, wearing a coat too light for the weather and boots held together with determination and wire. His hair needed cutting. His expression needed nothing. It was already fully formed into the kind of wariness that came from learning early that people left. "You're the teacher?" he asked. "Yes, you must be—" "Caleb Callahan. Pa sent me to fetch you. Your things ready?" "I'll need a moment." "We ain't got a moment. Storm's coming and we got 12 miles to cover. You can fix your hair on the wagon." Evelyn bit back her first response and grabbed her coat instead. "My trunk." "Already loaded. You coming or not?" She followed him down the narrow stairs and out into a morning so cold it felt like her lungs were freezing from the inside. A wagon waited in the street, hitched to 2 massive horses that looked infinitely more patient than their driver. The driver wasn't Wade Callahan. Evelyn had formed a picture in her mind during the long journey west. A rancher, widowed, probably in his 50s, weathered and distant, needing a governess more than a teacher, someone safe, someone who wouldn't notice if she only half existed. The man on that wagon seat looked about as safe as a loaded rifle, 35 maybe, 40 at most. Tall enough that even sitting down he seemed to take up too much space, shoulders like an ox yoke under a heavy sheepskin coat, dark hair, dark eyes, and a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't currently set in an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Callahan?" He looked at her for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to inventory everything, her worn dress, her thin coat, her complete unsuitability for frontier life. Then he looked away. "Get in." Not welcome, not thank you for coming, not even sorry about the accommodations. Just get in. Evelyn climbed up beside him while Caleb scrambled into the wagon bed behind them. Wade Callahan didn't offer his hand to help, didn't speak, just released the brake and sent the horses forward with a soft click of his tongue. They left Red Hollow in silence. The valley opened up around them like a threat. Mountains on all sides, their peaks lost in cloud. The road, if you could call 2 frozen ruts a road, wound through stands of pine so dark they looked black. Snow everywhere, dirty and tired from months of winter. The only sounds were the wagons creaking, the horses breathing, and the wind trying to find a way through Evelyn's inadequate coat. After an hour, she tried conversation. "Your son said a storm is coming." Wade didn't look at her. "Yep." "How far is your ranch?" "Far enough." "The valley is very dramatic." "Yep." "I appreciate you making the journey to collect me. I know it's an inconvenience." For the first time, he glanced her way. Something that wasn't quite a smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. "You always talk this much." Heat flooded her face. "I was attempting courtesy." "Don't need courtesy. Need you to teach reading and numbers so my kids don't grow up ignorant. That's the arrangement." "I'm aware of the arrangement, Mr. Callahan." "Then we understand each other." He didn't speak again for the next 2 hours. Evelyn spent that time trying not to freeze to death and wondering what kind of hell she'd actually signed up for. Behind her, Caleb was equally silent, but she could feel him watching, judging, waiting for her to fail whatever test this was. The ranch appeared suddenly as they crested a ridge. It sat in a small valley of its own, protected on 3 sides by timber and rock. A main house, larger than she'd expected, built from dark logs that had weathered to almost black. A barn that looked newer, corrals, outbuildings. Smoke rising from the chimney in a thin gray line. It should have looked welcoming. It looked like a fortress. Wade drove the wagon directly to the house and set the brake. "Caleb, take care of the horses. You—" He nodded at Evelyn. "Innate. I'll bring your trunk." "I can help." "Didn't ask if you could. Said I'd do it." He walked away before she could argue. Evelyn climbed down, her legs screaming after 3 hours of sitting. The front door stood slightly ajar. She pushed it open and stepped into Wade Callahan's house. The main room was larger than she'd expected. Stone fireplace taking up most of one wall, a fire burning low. Heavy wooden furniture that looked handmade, clean but spare, nothing extra, nothing decorative. Windows facing east and south, both currently showing nothing but gray sky and grayer land. A little girl sat at the table, drawing something with a piece of charcoal. She looked up when Evelyn entered, and for just a moment her whole face transformed with hope, so naked it hurt to see. Then she caught herself. The hope shuddered away behind the same wariness her brother wore. "Hello," Evelyn said softly. "You must be Rosie." The girl, 7, maybe 8, nodded. "I'm Miss Mercer. I'm going to be your teacher." "Ma'am?" Rosie's voice was barely a whisper. "May I see what you're drawing?" Rosie hesitated, then turned the paper so Evelyn could see. A horse. Not bad for a child with no formal training. The proportions were off, but the spirit was there. "That's wonderful. Do you like horses?" "Yes, ma'am." "Do you like to read?" Something flickered across Rosie's face. "Don't know how. Not really." "Would you like to learn?" Before Rosie could answer, Wade came in carrying Evelyn's trunk like it weighed nothing. He set it down harder than necessary. "Rosie, show Miss Mercer the back room. That's where she'll sleep." The back room was tiny. Just enough space for a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and maybe 2 steps in any direction. But it had a window, and a door that closed, and a small stove in the corner that actually worked. Evelyn had lived in worse, recently. "Thank you," she said to Rosie. "This will do very nicely." Rosie looked doubtful, but nodded and fled. Evelyn unpacked slowly, trying to make the space feel less like a cell. Her 2 dresses went in the chest. Her books, she'd only been able to bring 5, lined up on top. Her mother's cameo, the only jewelry she hadn't sold, found a place on the windowsill where morning light might hit it. When she emerged, Wade was at the table, drinking coffee. Caleb had come in and was hovering near the door like he might bolt any second. "Supper's at 6, Wade said without looking up. "Breakfast at 5. Lunch when there's time for it. You'll teach the kids mornings and help around the place afternoons. Sundays you can do what you want, but I expect you at meals." "What will I be teaching in the afternoons besides reading and arithmetic?" "Whatever needs doing, cooking, mending, garden work come spring. Ranch doesn't run itself." "I see. And my wages?" "20 a month, like the advertisement said. Paid first of each month." Evelyn sat down across from him, uninvited. "Mr. Callahan, I'm a trained teacher. I attended the Boston Normal School. I taught at one of the finest academies in— Don't care about Boston." He finally looked at her, and his eyes were harder than the mountains outside. "Don't care about your training. I need someone who won't run when things get difficult. Someone who won't quit when winter gets mean or the work gets hard. You think you're that person? Every instinct screamed at her to stand up, walk out, demand the respect she'd earned. But Boston was 1,000 miles away, and respect didn't pay for food. Yes, she said quietly, I'm that person. We'll see. He stood, grabbed his coat, and walked out without another word. Caleb watched her from the doorway, his expression unreadable. He's always like that. Case you were wondering. I wasn't. Ma died 4 years ago. He ain't been right since. I'm not here to replace your mother, Caleb. Good. 'Cause you couldn't. He followed his father outside, letting the door slam behind him. Evelyn sat at the table, alone in a strange house in a valley she didn't know, working for a man who clearly didn't want her there, teaching children who'd already decided she wouldn't last. The fire popped in the hearth. Outside, the first snowflakes of the coming storm began to fall. She'd made a terrible mistake, but she had nowhere else to go. The first week was a special kind of misery. Wade Callahan ran his ranch like a military operation. 5 a.m. sharp, everyone at the table. Breakfast was whatever Evelyn could scrape together from the supplies in the pantry. Bacon, eggs, biscuits that came out dense as river stones. Wade ate without comment, Caleb ate without looking at her, and Rosie ate like she was afraid the food might disappear. 6 a.m., lessons began. Caleb made it clear he considered book learning a waste of time. He could already read, barely, and figure numbers well enough to keep tally of cattle. Rosie was hungry to learn, but terrified of making mistakes. Every time Evelyn corrected her, the girl flinched. By noon, Wade expected Evelyn in the kitchen or helping with whatever crisis the ranch had produced that day. A fence that needed mending, chickens that needed feeding, laundry that needed scrubbing in water so cold her hands went numb. She wasn't built for this. Her hands blistered, then bled, then finally calloused. Her back ached from work she'd never done. Her pride took a beating every time Wade looked at her attempts at frontier cooking with an expression that said he'd eaten better meals out of a can. But she didn't quit, partly because she had nowhere to go, partly because something stubborn in her refused to give Wade Callahan the satisfaction. Mostly because of Rosie. The girl was starving, not for food, there was always enough, if barely, but for something gentler than the harsh world she'd grown up in. She followed Evelyn everywhere, silent as a shadow. Watched her read with an intensity that was almost painful. Brought her little things, a pretty rock, a feather, a flower pressed flat in a book. One night, 2 weeks in, Rosie appeared in Evelyn's doorway after bedtime. Miss Mercer? Evelyn looked up from the letter she'd been writing to no one. Yes, sweetheart? Could you read to me? Like you did this morning? Of course. Come here. Rosie climbed onto the narrow bed like she was afraid Evelyn might change her mind. Evelyn picked up Treasure Island, the only adventure story she'd brought, and began to read. Within 10 minutes, Rosie was asleep against her shoulder. Evelyn sat there, barely breathing, feeling the weight of this small person who'd decided to trust her. Outside, the wind howled like something dying. Inside, the stove ticked as it cooled. She heard Wade's footsteps in the hall before she saw him. He stopped in the doorway, filling the frame, looking at his daughter, looking at Evelyn. She does this? First time. Something shifted in his expression. Not softness exactly, but maybe the edge of it. Her ma used to read to her every night. After she died, Rosie stopped asking. I'll read to her whenever she wants. Wade nodded once. Then he stepped forward, scooped Rosie up with a gentleness that shocked Evelyn, and carried her to her own room without waking her. When he came back, he paused in Evelyn's doorway again. You settling in all right? It was the first personal question he'd asked in 2 weeks. Yes, thank you. Room warm enough? Yes. He nodded, started to leave, stopped. Biscuits are getting better. It wasn't much of a compliment, but from Wade Callahan, it felt like a medal. Thank you, Evelyn said again. He walked away and she sat there in the lamplight, wondering what the hell was happening to her. March turned into April and the valley played tricks. One day, the sun would break through, and the whole world would gleam like a promise. The snow would melt in rushing streams, birds would appear from nowhere, and you could almost believe winter was finished. The next day, a blizzard would bury everything under 3 feet of fresh powder and remind you that the mountains made their own rules. Evelyn learned to read the sky the way Wade and Caleb did. Learned which clouds meant snow and which meant wind. Learned to feel a storm coming in her bones before it arrived. She also learned that Wade Callahan wasn't cruel. Harsh, yes. Blunt as a hammer, absolutely. But not cruel. He never raised his voice to the children, never struck them. When Caleb mouthed off, which he did regularly, Wade just looked at him until the boy shut up on his own. When Rosie had nightmares, Wade sat with her until she fell back asleep, and he never once made Evelyn feel unsafe. That mattered more than she wanted to admit. One afternoon in late April, she was hanging laundry when she heard raised voices from the barn. Wade's, deep and controlled. Another man's, angry and getting louder. "Don't give a damn about your property lines, Callahan. That water's been shared for 20 years, was shared when my wife was alive. She had agreements with folks. I don't. So you're just going to cut us off? Let our cattle die?" "Not my problem, Vernon." Evelyn moved closer, staying out of sight. Through the barn door, she could see Wade facing down a man almost as big as he was. Older, meaner looking, with two riders flanking him like hired muscle. Vernon Pike. She'd heard the name in town. Owned the biggest spread west of Red Hollow, and had a reputation for taking what he wanted. "You're making a mistake," Pike said quietly. "Real big mistake." "That a threat?" "Just a fact. You can't run this place alone, Callahan. You're one bad winter away from losing everything. And when that happens, I'll be there to pick up the pieces." "Get off my land, Vernon. Heard you hired yourself a woman." "Boston lady." Pike's smile was ugly. That desperation or something else? Wade's whole body went still, the kind of still that came right before violence. "Get off my land." Pike held up his hands in mock surrender. "We're leaving, but you think about what I said. About all of it." They rode out slowly, making sure everyone knew they weren't afraid. Evelyn stepped back into the shadows, her heart hammering. She'd heard enough frontier stories to know what Pike's visit meant. Trouble coming, maybe war. That night at dinner, Wade was quieter than usual. Caleb kept glancing at his father like he wanted to ask something but didn't dare. Finally, Evelyn broke the silence. "Mr. Callahan, who was that man who came today?" Wade's eyes cut to her, sharp. "You were listening." "I was hanging laundry. I couldn't help but hear." "Vernon Pike owns the Triple P Ranch west of here. Been trying to run me off this land since my wife died." "Why?" "Because this valley's got the best water and grazing in 50 miles. Because he's a greedy son of a bitch who can't stand anyone telling him no." Caleb spoke up. "Pa, are we in trouble?" "No more than usual. But if he—" "We'll handle it." Wade's voice had steel in it. "We always do." Evelyn set down her fork carefully. "Is that why you needed a teacher? To make the ranch seem more established? More legitimate?" The silence was absolute. Wade looked at her for a long time. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Partly. Also because my kids needed learning. But yeah, woman living here, teaching, being part of the household, makes it harder for Pike to claim I'm just some drifter squatting on open range." "I see. That a problem for you, Miss Mercer?" Evelyn thought about Boston, about Thomas Whitmore returning her ring, about being used as a prop in someone else's social climbing for 3 years, about discovering that everyone she'd trusted had their own agenda. "No," she said finally. "As long as you're honest about it, it's not a problem." Something like respect flickered across Wade's face. "Fair enough." Spring came hard and fast after that. The snow melted in earnest, turning the valley into a mud pit. The cattle needed constant attention. Calves were born, some lived, some didn't. Evelyn learned to help with the ones that struggled, pulling them into the world covered in blood and birth slime, keeping them warm until they could stand. It was brutal, exhausting work. She'd never felt more alive. One morning in early May, she woke to Rosie shaking her shoulder. Miss Mercer, wake up." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. The flowers came." Evelyn let herself be dragged outside into a dawn so beautiful it hurt. The entire valley had exploded overnight into color. Wildflowers everywhere, purple lupine, yellow arrowleaf balsam root, red Indian paintbrush. After months of white and gray and brown, it looked like the earth had remembered how to dream. Rosie was spinning in circles, laughing. Evelyn found herself laughing too. Actually laughing, something she hadn't done since before her father died. Wade came around the corner of the barn, stopped, and stared at them. "You two gonna stand there all day or get to work?" But he was almost smiling when he said it. That afternoon, Evelyn was in the kitchen when she heard horses approaching. Multiple riders. Her stomach clenched. Wade was in the north pasture with Caleb. She was alone with Rosie. She moved to the window and saw 4 men dismounting in the yard. Vernon Pike and 3 others she didn't recognize. Pike knocked hard on the door. Evelyn took a breath, smoothed her apron, and answered. "Mr. Pike." "Miss Mercer, isn't it?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Wade around?" "Mr. Callahan is working. May I take a message?" "I'll wait." "That won't be possible. He could be hours." Pike's expression hardened. "Listen, sweetheart. Miss Mercer will do fine." "Miss Mercer." He loaded the words with contempt. "I'm here on business, real business. Not the kind a schoolteacher would understand." "Then I'll tell Mr. Callahan you called. Good day." She started to close the door. Pike's boot stopped it. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Behind Evelyn, Rosie made a small, frightened sound. Something cold and clear settled over Evelyn's mind. She'd spent her entire life being pushed around by men who thought they owned the world. She was done. "Remove your boot from the door, Mr. Pike. Now." "Or what?" Evelyn reached for the rifle Wade kept by the door. She'd watched him load it enough times, watched him show Caleb how to hold it, how to aim. She pointed it directly at Vernon Pike's chest. Her hands shook, but not from fear. "Or I'll show you exactly how much this schoolteacher understands." Pike's face went purple. "You wouldn't dare. Test me." For 5 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then Pike stepped back, slowly. "You just made a real big mistake, lady. You're the second person to tell me that since I came to Montana. I'm still here." Pike and his men mounted up and rode out hard, leaving divots in the mud. Evelyn lowered the rifle. Her hands were shaking properly now. Rosie was staring at her like she'd just slayed a dragon. "Miss Mercer, that was stupid. That was very stupid." But when Wade came thundering into the yard an hour later, Caleb had seen Pike's men leaving and raced to tell him Evelyn was ready. Wade burst through the door. "What happened?" Evelyn met his eyes steadily. "Pike came looking for you. I sent him away." "How?" "With the rifle." Wade's expression went through several changes very quickly. Shock. Anger. Something that might have been fear. Then, finally, something else entirely. "You pulled a gun on Vernon Pike." "Yes." "You've been here 2 months and you pulled a gun on the most dangerous man in the valley." "He wouldn't leave. Rosie was frightened." Wade sat down heavily, ran both hands through his hair, started to speak, stopped, tried again. "Jesus Christ, woman. I'm sorry if I overstepped. You—" He looked at her, really looked at her. "You got any idea what you just did? Defended your home? Started a war." The weight of that settled over the room like ash. Rosie came and pressed against Evelyn's side. Evelyn put her arm around the girl automatically. "Then I suppose we'd better be ready for it," she said quietly. Wade stared at her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he laughed, a short, sharp bark of sound with no humor in it. "You're either the bravest woman I ever met or the craziest. Can it be both?" He shook his head, stood up, and grabbed his coat. "Caleb, get your rifle." "Where are you going?" Evelyn asked. "To town, to make sure Pike knows that if he comes at this ranch, he comes at all of us. And to buy more ammunition." He paused at the door. "Next time, don't point the gun unless you're ready to shoot. Pike's not a man who forgives threats." "I wasn't threatening." Their eyes locked. "Good," Wade said finally. "Neither am I." That night, Evelyn lay awake listening to the house settle around her. Somewhere down the hall, Rosie was sleeping peacefully. Caleb's snoring rattled through the walls. Wade's room was silent, but she could see lamplight under his door. She thought about Thomas Whitmore, about the life she'd almost had in Boston, safe and respectable and completely empty. Then she thought about standing in that doorway with a rifle in her hands, protecting a child who wasn't hers, defending a home she barely knew. For the first time in years, Evelyn Mercer had absolutely no idea what happened next. But she was awake enough to find out. Word spread through Red Hollow faster than wildfire in dry grass. By the time Wade returned from town the next afternoon, half the valley knew that the Boston schoolteacher had pulled a rifle on Vernon Pike. The other half had heard she'd actually shot him. Both versions agreed she was either insane or suicidal, and Wade Callahan must be desperate to keep someone like that under his roof. Wade didn't say much when he came through the door carrying supplies. Just set down the flour sack and the coffee tin and looked at Evelyn for a long moment. "You're famous. I gathered that from the way people were staring when I went to the well this morning. Pike's telling everyone you threatened to kill him. I threatened to shoot him. There's a difference." Caleb snorted from where he was pretending to read at the table. Wade shot him a look that wiped the smile right off his face. "This ain't funny, boy. Pike's got friends. Mean ones." "So do we," Caleb said quietly. "Do we?" Wade pulled out a chair and sat heavily. "Name one person in this valley who'd stand with us against the Triple P." The silence stretched. Evelyn kept kneading bread dough, her hands working automatically. She'd learned that staying busy made hard conversations easier to stomach. "The Hendersons," she said finally. "Carl Henderson owes Pike money for last year's hay." "The Morrisons, then." "Kate Morrison's scared of her own shadow. You think she'd cross Vernon Pike?" "Someone will stand with you." Evelyn shaped the dough into a ball with more force than necessary. "You've lived here for years. You have history with these people." Wade's laugh was bitter. "History don't mean much when bullets start flying. People got families to protect. Can't blame them for looking after their own." "Then what do we do?" The word slipped out before she could catch it. "We, not you." Wade caught it too. His eyes flicked to hers, something unreadable moving behind them. "We keep our heads down. Work the ranch. Hope Pike decides we're not worth the trouble." "You don't believe that?" "No. But it's the best option we got." That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. The wind had picked up again, rattling the windows in their frames. Spring in Montana was a liar, promised warmth during the day, then stabbed you with cold once the sun went down. She got up, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and padded into the main room. The fire had burned down to embers. She was building it back up when Wade's door opened. He stopped when he saw her. "Didn't mean to wake you," Evelyn said. "Wasn't asleep." He crossed to the kitchen, poured himself coffee from the pot that was always on the stove. "You want some?" "Please." They sat at opposite ends of the table. The lamp between them cast shadows that made Wade's face look older, harder. Or maybe that wasn't the shadows. "Can I ask you something?" Evelyn said. "Can I stop you?" "Why did you really hire me?" Wade took a long drink of coffee. "Told you already. Kids needed teaching." "There's more to it than that." "You always this persistent?" "Yes." He almost smiled. "Pike wasn't wrong earlier. I can't run this place alone. Not forever. I got 2 kids to raise, cattle to tend, land to protect. Every rancher in this valley is waiting for me to fail so they can pick over the pieces." "Because you're alone." "Because I'm weak." The word came out hard and angry. "My wife, Claire, she was the strong one, made friends easy, knew how to talk to people, make them feel important, kept the peace between me and half the valley. After she died..." He trailed off, staring into his cup like it might have answers. "After she died, people saw you differently. Saw an opportunity. Saw a man who couldn't hold it together. Saw land they could take if they pushed hard enough. So you hired a woman to make them think you were rebuilding, starting over. Hired a teacher to give my kids an education and make this ranch look like it had a future instead of just a past." He met her eyes. "That bother you?" Evelyn thought about it. "No, I've been used for worse reasons." "Boston man?" She shouldn't have been surprised he'd guessed. "Among others." "He was a fool." The words were said so matter-of-factly that Evelyn almost missed them. When they registered, warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. "You don't know anything about him." "No, he let you go. That makes him a fool." They sat in silence after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Outside, a coyote called to the darkness. Another answered from farther up the valley. "You scared?" Wade asked eventually. "Of Pike?" "Of everything. This life. This place." Evelyn considered lying, considered saying something brave and foolish. Instead, she told the truth. Terrified. Every single day. But you stay. Where else would I go? Back to Boston. Back to whatever life you had before. There's nothing to go back to. That life ended the day my father died in debtor's prison, and every door in Boston closed in my face. She wrapped both hands around her cup. This is all I have now. This ranch. These children. This chance. Wade was quiet for a long time, then, Pike comes back, you stay inside. You don't go for the rifle. You don't play hero. You understand? I can't promise that. Evelyn, it was the first time he'd used her given name. It stopped them both. I can't promise to hide while someone threatens your children, she finished quietly. I won't. Something shifted in Wade's expression. Not softness, exactly, but recognition. Like he was seeing her clearly for the first time and realizing she was more than he'd bargained for. You're going to get yourself killed. Probably, but at least I'll die mattering to someone. The rawness of that statement hung between them like smoke. Wade stood abruptly. Get some sleep. We got work tomorrow. Wade, sleep, Evelyn. He disappeared into his room, and she sat there in the lamplight wondering what the hell she'd just confessed, and why it had felt so much like the truth. The uneasy peace lasted 3 weeks, long enough for Evelyn to think maybe Pike had decided they weren't worth the trouble, long enough for the ranch to settle into something that almost felt like routine. Lessons in the morning, work in the afternoon, dinners that sometimes included actual conversation instead of hostile silence. Caleb was slowly thawing. He still tested her, asked questions designed to prove she didn't know anything about real life, challenged her on facts he thought she'd made up. But he was listening more, reading the books she gave him without being forced. Once, she caught him teaching Rosie her letters when he thought no one was watching. Rosie had bloomed like the wildflowers. The frightened, silent child had discovered she could ask questions, could laugh, could trust that the adults around her wouldn't disappear. She followed Evelyn everywhere, soaking up attention like parched ground taking rain. And Wade was harder to read. He still didn't talk much. Still worked from sunup to sundown, but he'd started doing small things, making sure Evelyn's coffee cup was filled before his own, fixing the drafty window in her room without being asked, coming back from town with a hair ribbon for Rosie and a new book for Caleb, and once, a tin of real tea for Evelyn because he'd heard her mention she missed it. Didn't have to do that, she'd said when he handed it to her awkwardly. Store had it. Thought you might want it. Thank you. It's just tea. But they both knew it wasn't. The blow came on a Tuesday. Evelyn was in the garden, optimistically called that, though it was mostly mud and hope at this point, when she heard riders coming hard and fast. Too many of them, too urgent. She stood, shaded her eyes, and felt her stomach drop. 8 men. Vernon Pike in the lead, his face set like stone. The others spread out in a line that looked military, planned. Wade came out of the barn, Caleb right behind him, both of them armed. That's far enough, Vernon. Pike reined in 20 feet from the porch. His men fanned out, surrounding the yard. Evelyn's pulse hammered in her throat. Got papers here, Callahan, legal and proper. Papers for what? Water rights. Turns out your claim on the North Creek is disputed. Has been for years. County surveyor agrees with me. That water's on Triple P land. Bullshit. My wife had deed to that creek going back 15 years. Your wife ain't here to argue about it. Pike's smile was cruel. And the surveyor says different. You want to take it up with the territorial court, you're welcome to try. But until then, you and yours stay clear of that water. You cut me off from that creek, and half my cattle die by midsummer. Not my problem. Wade's hand drifted toward his rifle. Every one of Pike's men tensed. Evelyn moved without thinking, walked straight across the yard until she was standing between Wade and Pike's horse. Miss Mercer, Pike's voice dripped false courtesy. You should go inside. This is men's business. If it concerns this ranch, it concerns me. May I see those papers? Ain't none of your The papers, Mr. Pike. Something about her tone, or maybe the way she held herself, chin up, refusing to be dismissed, made Pike hesitate. He pulled out a folded document and tossed it down. Evelyn picked it up, brushed off the dirt, and read carefully. Behind her, she could feel Wade's tension like a physical thing. Caleb had moved to the porch rail, his rifle across his knees. Rosie's face appeared in the window, pale and scared. The document was official looking. County seal, proper signatures, all the legal language designed to intimidate people who couldn't read well. It was also complete horseshit. This survey was conducted last month, Evelyn said slowly. So? By a William Hayes, who signs as Deputy Territorial Surveyor. That's right. Mr. Hayes is also listed in last year's Red Hollow census as your brother-in-law, married to your sister Elizabeth, living on Triple P land. She looked up, her voice carrying across the yard. Quite a coincidence, finding a surveyor in the family just when you needed one. Pike's face went dark red. You calling me a liar? I'm saying this document wouldn't hold up in any honest court. The conflict of interest alone. Oh, you think you're smart, Boston? Think your fancy education makes you better than us? I think you're trying to steal water rights with forged papers, and I think everyone in this valley will know about it by sunset. The threat hung in the air. Pike leaned forward in his saddle, his voice dropping to something dangerous. You got no idea what you're playing with, girl. No idea who you're crossing. Then educate me. For a heartbeat, Evelyn thought he might actually shoot her. His hand moved toward his gun, his eyes went flat and mean, and she understood with crystal clarity that men like Vernon Pike didn't accept humiliation well. Then Wade stepped up beside her. He didn't say anything, didn't raise his rifle, just stood there, solid and immovable, his presence saying everything words couldn't. Caleb joined them on the other side, 14 years old and scared to death but trying desperately not to show it. 3 of them, against 8 armed riders. The math was bad and everyone knew it. But Pike saw something in their faces that made him think twice. Maybe it was Wade's absolute readiness to die defending his land. Maybe it was the fact that the Boston schoolteacher hadn't flinched. Maybe it was just the calculation that killing 3 people in broad daylight was hard to explain, even in Montana. This ain't over, Pike said finally. No, Wade agreed quietly. I expect it's not. Pike wheeled his horse around so violently it half-reared. His men followed, but slower, some of them looking back like they weren't sure what they'd just witnessed. When the dust settled, Wade turned to Evelyn. I told you to stay inside if he came back. You did. You directly disobeyed me. Yes. That paper, you could really prove it's fake. In a proper court? Absolutely. Out here? She shrugged. Might as well be written in water. Wade stared at her. Then he did something that shocked her more than Pike's entire visit. He laughed. Actually laughed, deep and genuine, his whole body shaking with it. You're insane. You know that? I've been told. Called out Vernon Pike for fraud in front of his own men. Made him back down on his own play. Wade shook his head, still grinning. Claire would have liked you. It was the first time he'd mentioned his wife directly to her. The weight of that trust settled over Evelyn like a blanket. I'm not trying to replace her, Evelyn said quietly. I know. Wade's smile faded, but something gentler took its place. You couldn't. You're nothing like her. He meant it as a compliment. Somehow, Evelyn knew that. Caleb cleared his throat. Pa? What do we do now? The moment broke. Wade's face hardened back into the practical rancher who dealt with problems instead of feelings. Now we prepare for war. Real war, not just words. He looked at Evelyn. You sure you want to be here for that? Evelyn thought about Boston, about the safe, empty life she could have had, about running away from every hard thing until there was nothing left of her worth keeping. I'm sure. Then you need to learn to shoot properly, not just point and pray. Wade headed toward the barn. Caleb, get the rifles. Miss Mercer's about to get an education in frontier justice. The next 2 weeks changed everything. Wade taught Evelyn to shoot the way he did everything else, bluntly, efficiently, and with no patience for mistakes. They set up targets behind the barn, and she practiced until her shoulder ached from the rifle's kick and her ears rang from the noise. Stop flinching before you pull the trigger, Wade said for the 100th time. I'm not flinching. You're absolutely flinching. Caleb, show her. Caleb demonstrated, his form perfect from years of practice. The target shattered. See? Smooth pull. Don't anticipate the shot. Evelyn tried again. Missed by a mile. You're thinking too much, Wade said, standing behind her now. close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Don't think, just breathe and squeeze. His hand came up to adjust her elbow. The touch was brief, professional, and it sent electricity straight through her body. Focus. She had to focus. She breathed, squeezed. The bottle exploded. There, that's it, Caleb whooped. Did you see that, Pa? I saw. Wade stepped back, and Evelyn immediately felt colder. Again, and this time faster reload. They practiced for hours every evening, shooting, loading, cleaning the weapons until she could do it in her sleep. Wade was relentless but fair, pushing her hard but never past her breaking point. Rosie watched from the porch, sometimes clapping when Evelyn hit her target. Once, the girl brought out lemonade for all of them, and they sat in the dust drinking it like it was champagne. You're getting good, Miss Mercer, Rosie said seriously. Your father's a good teacher. Ma used to shoot too. She could hit a rabbit at 100 yards. Evelyn glanced at Wade. He'd gone very still. She sounds like she was remarkable. She was. Rosie's voice was soft. But she's gone now, and you're here. The simplicity of it, the childlike acceptance that life moved forward whether you wanted it to or not, made Evelyn's throat tight. I am here, she agreed, and I'm not going anywhere. Wade met her eyes over Rosie's head. Something passed between them, an understanding, a promise. They were in this together now, whatever came next. What came next was Kate Morrison, showing up at dawn on a Sunday with her 2 children and a black eye she tried to hide behind her bonnet. Evelyn answered the door to find the woman shaking so hard she could barely stand. Mrs. Morrison? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to come uninvited. I didn't know where else. Her voice broke. Come inside, please. Evelyn guided her to a chair. The children, a boy about Caleb's age and a younger girl, huddled together by the door. Rosie, get some water. Caleb, find your father. Wade appeared within minutes, took one look at Kate Morrison's face, and his expression went murderous. Vernon? Kate shook her head frantically. My husband, Jack. He's been drinking more since the debts piled up. Last night She couldn't finish. Where is he now? Passed out, but he'll wake soon, and when he realizes I left, you're staying here. Wade's voice allowed no argument. You and the kids, long as you need. I can't ask you to. Ain't asking. You're staying. Evelyn brought Kate to her own room, gave her water and a cloth for her face. The woman's hand shook as she pressed it to her bruised eye. I heard what you did, with Vernon Pike. Kate's voice was barely a whisper. Standing up to him like that? I thought if you could be that brave, maybe I could too. This is brave, Evelyn said firmly. Leaving is the bravest thing you could do. Jack will come for me. Let him try. Kate's eyes went wide. You don't know what he's like when he's angry. I know what Wade's like when someone threatens people under his roof. Your husband won't get past the porch. It was a promise Evelyn wasn't sure she could keep, but Kate needed to hear it anyway. Jack Morrison showed up that afternoon, drunk and furious. Wade met him in the yard with his rifle and an expression that could have frozen hell solid. Get off my land, Jack. That's my wife you got in there. That's a woman asking for shelter, and she's getting it. You got no right, miss. I got every right. She's scared of you, Jack. You done that. You put fear in your own wife's eyes. Wade's voice was quiet, but it carried. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sober up. You're going to figure out how to be the man she married instead of the one you turned into. And when you can look me in the eye and promise you won't lay hands on her again, we'll talk. You can't keep her from me. Watch me. Morrison lunged forward. Wade dropped him with a single punch that echoed across the valley. The man stayed down, groaning in the dirt. Next time I won't use my fist. Wade stood over him, utterly still. Get gone, Jack. Don't come back until you're sober and ready to apologize. Morrison crawled to his horse and rode off, weaving in the saddle. Inside, Kate Morrison was crying against Evelyn's shoulder. He's going to kill me for this. No, Evelyn said firmly. He's not. Because you're not going back. I have to eventually. The ranch, the children are safer here. And the ranch will still be there when you're ready, if you're ever ready. Kate pulled back, searching Evelyn's face. How did you get so strong? I'm not strong. I'm just tired of being afraid. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough. Word spread fast that Wade Callahan was harboring Jack Morrison's wife. Some people thought he was noble. Others thought he was asking for trouble. A few suggested there was more to it than simple protection. Those rumors reached Wade's ears within a week. He came into the kitchen one evening where Evelyn was teaching Kate how to make decent biscuits. His expression was thunderous. "We need to talk." Kate immediately stood. "I should go." "Stay." Wade's tone gentled for her. "This ain't about you." He jerked his head toward the door. Evelyn followed him outside into the twilight. "People are talking," he said without preamble. "People always talk. They're saying we're—" He trailed off, jaw working. "I know what they're saying." Evelyn crossed her arms. "Does it matter?" "Matters if it puts you in danger. Matters if Pike uses it against us." "Let him try." "Evelyn." Wade scrubbed a hand over his face. "I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protecting from gossip. I need you to keep doing exactly what you're doing, being decent in a place that's forgotten what decent looks like." "That's all this is to you? Me being decent?" The question hung between them, loaded with something neither of them was ready to name. "What else would it be?" Evelyn asked quietly. Wade looked at her for a long moment. In the failing light, his eyes were very dark. "Nothing. Forget I asked." He walked away before she could respond, and Evelyn stood there feeling like she'd missed something important. Kate Morrison stayed for 2 weeks before her husband showed up again. Sober this time, hat in hands, asking quiet and desperate if she'd come talk to him. Wade let them use the barn, stood guard outside with his rifle while they talked for an hour. When Kate emerged, her eyes were red but clear. "I'm going home," she told Evelyn, "but I told Jack, if he ever raises a hand to me again, I'm coming back here, and I'm not leaving. Ever. You're always welcome here." "I know." Kate hugged her hard. "Thank you for showing me what courage looks like." After the Morrisons left, the ranch felt empty. That night at dinner, Rosie was unusually quiet. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Evelyn asked. "Is Mrs. Morrison going to be okay?" "I think so. She knows she has choices now." "Pa?" Rosie turned to her father. "Would you ever hurt somebody like Mr. Morrison hurt Mrs. Morrison?" Wade set down his fork carefully. "No, never." "How do I know?" "Because I'm telling you. Because you can trust my word." He looked at both his children. "A man who hurts women and children ain't a man. He's a coward, and I'd rather die than be that." Caleb spoke up. "What if you got real angry? What if— Anger ain't an excuse. Not ever." Wade's voice was firm. "Your ma and I had fights, said things we regretted, but I never once raised a hand to her. That's a line you don't cross." Rosie seemed satisfied with that. She went back to her dinner, but later, when Evelyn was cleaning up, Wade appeared in the kitchen doorway. "That question Rosie asked, that come from something I did?" "No, it came from her seeing what happened to Kate and being smart enough to wonder." "I'd never— "I know." Evelyn dried her hands on her apron. "I've seen you angry, Wade. I've seen you furious, but I've never once been afraid of you." Something in his expression cracked open, just for a second. "You should be. Sometimes." "Why?" "Because I'm not a good man, Evelyn. I've killed people, done things I can't take back. I got a temper that scares even me sometimes. And yet you choose every day to be gentle with your children, to help women who need shelter, to stand up against men who abuse their power." She met his eyes steadily. "That's not a bad man, Wade. That's a good man fighting every day to stay good. There's a difference." He was quiet for a long time. "You see the best in people," he said finally, "even when they don't deserve it." "Maybe. Or maybe I just see people clearly, including you." The air between them felt thick, charged with something neither of them knew how to name. Wade cleared his throat. "Getting late. Should turn in." "Yes. Good night, Wade." "Good night." But neither of them moved for a long moment, and when Wade finally left, Evelyn stood in the kitchen wondering when exactly the walls between them had started coming down, and whether that was the most dangerous thing that had happened yet. Summer hit the valley like a hammer. The snow that had buried everything for months vanished almost overnight, leaving behind mud that sucked at boots and wagon wheels. The creek swelled with runoff, rushing past the ranch in a constant roar that made conversation difficult near the water. Cattle spread out across the high pastures, finally free to graze on grass instead of hay. Wade worked 18-hour days trying to make up for lost time. Caleb rode with him most mornings, learning the boundary lines and water sources, growing taller and more confident with every week. Rosie helped Evelyn in the garden, which had finally started producing actual vegetables instead of just optimistic weeds. The ranch settled into a rhythm that almost felt normal. Then June brought the heat, and with it, trouble. It started with small things: a fence cut overnight, letting cattle drift onto Pike's land; a hay barn that caught fire for no reason anyone could explain; supplies ordered from town that never arrived; the shopkeeper claiming he'd never received payment even though Wade had the receipt. "He's squeezing us," Wade said one night, studying the account books by lamplight, "trying to make it too expensive to stay." "Can we afford it?" Evelyn asked. "For now. Maybe through fall if we're careful." He closed the ledger hard enough to make dust puff up. "But another winter like the last one? We'd be finished." Caleb looked up from the saddle he was mending. "What if we sold some of the herd early? Get cash before Pike can interfere. Prices are terrible right now. We'd lose half their value." "Better than losing everything." Wade rubbed his eyes. He looked exhausted, older than his years. "I'll think about it." But thinking didn't solve the problem of Vernon Pike owning half the valley and wanting the other half. 2 days later, Evelyn was hanging laundry when she saw riders approaching from the east. Not Pike's men this time. These looked different, younger, harder. She dropped the sheet she'd been pinning and ran for the house. "Wade, riders coming!" He was out the door with his rifle before she finished speaking. Caleb grabbed his own gun and took position by the window. Rosie started to follow, but Evelyn caught her. "No, sweetheart. You stay inside with me." "But Pa, your father knows what he's doing." Through the window, Evelyn watched 5 men rein up in the yard. They didn't dismount. That felt significant, though she wasn't sure why. The one in front was young, maybe 25, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. He sat his horse like he'd been born on it. "You Wade Callahan?" "Depends who's asking." "Name's Cole Briggs. Heard you might have work for men who can handle themselves." Wade's expression didn't change. "Heard wrong." "That's so?" "Because word is Vernon Pike's been making trouble. Thought you might need help discouraging him." "Don't need the kind of help that comes with guns for hire." Briggs smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We ain't guns for hire. We're cowboys looking for work. Just happens we're real good at protecting what's ours when somebody tries to take it. Nothing here is yours. Could be, if you were smart enough to accept the help." Wade's rifle came up slightly, not pointing at anyone, just reminding them it was there. "I said no. Now get off my land before I make you." Briggs studied him for a long moment. Then he shrugged. "Suit yourself. But when Pike comes calling with his whole crew, don't say we didn't offer." They rode out slowly, deliberately taking their time about it. Inside, Caleb lowered his rifle. "Pa, maybe we should have—" "No." Wade's voice was flat. "Men like that solve one problem by creating 10 others. We do this ourselves or not at all." "But we can't fight Pike alone." "Then we'll lose alone. Better than owing our lives to hired killers." Evelyn understood the logic, even if she didn't agree with it. Wade had his pride, his code. He'd rather go down fighting clean than win dirty. It was noble. It was also probably going to get them all killed. That night, she couldn't sleep. The heat sat on her chest like a weight, making every breath feel thick. She got up, pulled on her wrapper, and went to sit on the porch. The valley spread out before her in shades of blue and black. Stars overhead like spilled salt. Somewhere out there, coyotes were having a conversation in yips and howls. The night smelled like pine and dust and growing things. She'd been here 4 months, felt like 4 years, felt like she'd never lived anywhere else. The door opened behind her. Wade stepped out, shirtless, his suspenders hanging loose over worn trousers. Even in the darkness, she could see the scars on his chest and shoulders. Working scars, fighting scars, life scars. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "Too hot." "Yeah." He sat on the step beside her, not close enough to touch, but near enough that she could feel the warmth radiating off his skin. "Sorry about earlier, with Briggs. You don't need to apologize for having principles. Principles don't stop bullets. Neither do hired guns. Not the kind that matter. Wade looked at her sidelong. You ever think you made a mistake coming here? Every day. That surprised a laugh out of him. Honest, at least. I'm too tired to lie. Evelyn pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. But no, not really. I'd rather be here making mistakes that matter than back in Boston making no mistakes at all because I never tried anything. Even if it gets you killed? Even then. They sat in silence for a while. A bat swooped past, chasing insects. The coyotes went quiet, which probably meant they'd caught something. Claire used to sit out here, Wade said suddenly, after the kids were asleep. Said it was the only time the world felt big enough. It was the most he'd ever said about his wife directly. Evelyn waited. She was better than me at everything, smarter, kinder, better with people. I never understood why she chose this life. Chose me. His voice was rough. After she died, I kept thinking she'd made a mistake. That if she'd married someone else, someone better, she'd still be alive. How did she die? Fever. Started in her lungs, spread fast. We tried everything, doctors from Billings, home remedies, prayers. Nothing worked. She was gone in 2 weeks. He was quiet for a moment. Caleb was 10, Rosie was 4. They watched her waste away, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do to stop it. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. Wade stood abruptly, like the confession had cost him something. Get some sleep, Evelyn. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. He went inside before she could respond. Evelyn sat there a while longer, thinking about the way he'd said his wife's name with such reverence and wondering why it made her chest ache. The long day Wade predicted turned into a long week. 3 of his best cattle went missing. The north fence was cut again, and this time someone had scattered broken glass in the mud near the gate, laming 2 horses. A fire started in the dry grass south of the house, small enough that they caught it before it spread, but clearly deliberate. Pike was escalating. Wade stopped sleeping more than a few hours a night. He and Caleb took turns keeping watch, but exhaustion was wearing them both down. Evelyn caught Caleb nodding off during lessons twice, and Wade was getting short-tempered over small things. This can't continue, Evelyn said one morning after Wade snapped at Rosie for spilling milk. I know. So what are we going to do? I'm working on it. Work faster. He glared at her, but there was no real heat in it, just bone-deep weariness. That afternoon, while Wade and Caleb were checking the south pasture, Evelyn made a decision. She hitched up the wagon herself, took 3 tries and some creative cursing, but she managed, and drove into town. Red Hollow looked the same as always, dusty, tired, barely clinging to existence. She tied up outside the general store and went inside. Mr. Hendricks looked up from his counter, surprise flashing across his face. Miss Mercer, don't usually see you in town alone. I need to place an order. Sure, what do you need? Information, actually. She met his eyes steadily. About Vernon Pike's business dealings, specifically who he owes money to and who owes him. Hendrick's expression went carefully blank. That's dangerous talk, miss. I'm aware. Will you help me or not? Why would I? Because Pike controls this valley through debt and intimidation. Because everyone's afraid of him, but nobody actually likes him. Because if someone stood up to him, really stood up, with proof of his dealings, half the valley would follow. And you think Wade Callahan's that someone? I think Wade Callahan's trying to be, but he can't do it alone. Hendricks studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed. There's a ledger. Pike keeps it at the Territorial Bank in Billings. Lists every debt, every deal, every threat he's made to collect. He lowered his voice. My brother works there. Says Pike's got half the territory by the throat, but the records would prove it. Problem is getting access. Could your brother get us copies? Maybe. But what good would that do? Pike owns the sheriff, owns the judge. Who's going to hold him accountable? People will, if they see it in black and white, if they understand they're not alone in being victims. That's a mighty big if. I know. Evelyn leaned forward. But it's the only play we have. Will you help? Hendricks was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded. I'll talk to my brother. No promises. Thank you. Evelyn was halfway back to the ranch when she realized she'd just committed to a plan that could get everyone killed. But turning back felt impossible. They'd come too far. Wade was waiting in the yard when she arrived, his expression thunderous. "Where the hell were you?" "Town. I needed supplies." "Supplies?" He didn't believe her for a second. "You went alone, without telling anyone, while Pike's got men out looking for any excuse to cause trouble." "I can take care of myself." "That ain't the point." His voice rose. "You can't just— Damn it, Evelyn, you could have been hurt." "But I wasn't. This time." He grabbed her arm. Not hard, just urgent. "What happens next time? What happens when Pike's men find you alone on the road and decide to send a message?" "Then I'll handle it." "Like hell you will." He was shouting now, something wild in his eyes. "You think I can lose—" He stopped abruptly, dropped her arm like it burned. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. "You can't lose what?" Evelyn asked quietly. "Nothing. Forget it." Wade turned away. "Just don't do it again." He stalked off toward the barn, leaving Evelyn standing there with her heart pounding and the ghost of his grip still warm on her arm. She'd seen fear in his eyes, real, raw fear. Not for himself, for her. That night, neither of them spoke about it. Dinner was tense and silent. Afterward, Wade disappeared into the barn and didn't come back until well past midnight. Evelyn lay awake listening to him move quietly through the house, checking locks, banking the fire. His footsteps paused outside her door. She held her breath. After a long moment, he moved on. She released the breath she'd been holding and stared at the ceiling, wondering when exactly everything had gotten so complicated. Hendrick's brother came through 2 weeks later. He arrived at the ranch at dawn, looking nervous, carrying a satchel stuffed with papers. Wade took him into the house while Evelyn made coffee and Caleb stood guard outside. "These are copies," the man, Thomas Hendricks, younger and softer than his brother, explained. "The originals are still in Billings, but everything's here. Every loan Pike's made at rates that should be illegal, every property he's seized for non-payment, every bribe he's paid to local officials." Wade flipped through the pages, his expression getting darker with each one. Jesus, he's got his hooks in everyone. Not everyone, but enough. Thomas looked at Evelyn. "Your instinct was right. People would turn on him if they knew. Problem is, making them believe it." "We need to make it public," Evelyn said. "Not just tell people, but show them. All at once, so Pike can't silence anyone before the word spreads." "How?" Wade asked. Evelyn thought fast. "The cattlemen's meeting, next month in Red Hollow. Every rancher in the territory will be there. We present the evidence then, in front of everyone." "Pike will be there too," Caleb pointed out from the doorway. "Good. Let him try to explain it to their faces." Wade set down the papers carefully. "This is dangerous. Pike finds out what we're planning before the meeting. He'll kill us all. So we don't let him find out. And if we do this, if we expose him publicly, there's no going back. He'll come at us with everything he has. He's already coming at us with everything he has. At least this way we hit back." Wade looked at her for a long moment, then at Thomas, then at the papers spread across the table like evidence in a trial. "All right," he said finally. "We do it. But we do it smart. No one else knows. Not even people we trust. The fewer people who can talk, the better." Thomas nodded and left quickly, like staying any longer might make him a target. After he was gone, Wade poured himself coffee and stared out the window at the brightening valley. "You know this might not work," he said without turning around. "I know. Might make everything worse." "I know that too. So why push for it?" Evelyn joined him at the window. "Because hiding hasn't worked. Because being afraid hasn't worked. Because at some point you have to stand up and fight, even if you're going to lose. Otherwise, what's the point?" Wade looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You're braver than you think," he said quietly. "So are you." The moment held, stretched, became something neither of them knew how to name. Then Rosie burst through the door, chattering about a bird's nest she'd found, and the spell broke. But the feeling lingered. The weeks before the cattlemen's meeting were the longest of Evelyn's life. Every day felt like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Every rider in the distance might be Pike's men coming for them. Every unexpected noise made her reach for the rifle. Wade drilled them all on what to do if trouble came, where to hide, how to escape, who to ride to for help. "You're scaring the children," Evelyn said one night after a particularly intense practice session. "Better scared and alive than brave and dead. They need to feel safe in their own home. They need to survive." Wade's voice was hard. "When Pike comes, and he will come, I need to know they'll do what I say without hesitating. That means practice. And what about after? When this is over, assuming we survive, do they spend the rest of their lives waiting for the next attack? If that's what it takes. That's not living, Wade. That's just existing. It's all we got." The shout echoed through the house. In the sudden silence, they could hear Rosie crying in her room. Wade's face went pale. "I didn't mean—" "I know." Evelyn touched his arm gently. "Go talk to her. I'll finish up here." He went, shoulders slumped like defeat. Evelyn stood in the kitchen surrounded by the evidence of their small war, rifles cleaned and ready, ammunition counted, escape routes planned, and wondered if there was any version of this where everyone made it out whole. The night before the meeting, none of them could sleep. They sat together in the main room, the lamp burning low, nobody speaking. Rosie dozed against Wade's shoulder. Caleb cleaned his rifle for the 10th time. Evelyn pretended to read but hadn't turned a page in an hour. Finally, Wade broke the silence. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you all to know something." He looked at each of them in turn. "You made this place feel like a home again. After Claire died, it was just a house, a place to sleep and work and try to forget. But you—" His voice caught. "You brought it back to life." "Pa," Caleb said quietly. "Let me finish." Wade swallowed hard. "Caleb, you've grown into a man I'm proud of, strong and smart and braver than you know. Rosie, you're the light in every dark day. Your ma would be so proud of the girl you're becoming." Rosie was crying silently. Wade turned to Evelyn last. "And you, I don't even know what to say. You came here broken and scared, and somehow you ended up being the strongest person I know. You stood up when everyone else backed down. You stayed when any sane person would have run. Wade, I need to say this, in case I don't get another chance." He took a breath. "You made me remember what it feels like to want something beyond just surviving another day. You made me—" A gunshot cracked through the night, then another. Wade was on his feet instantly. "Barn's on fire! Caleb, get the rifles! Evelyn, take Rosie to the root cellar and don't come out until I say." Through the window, Evelyn could see flames already engulfing the barn. Shadows moved in the firelight. Men on horses. Pike had come early. Wade grabbed his rifle and kicked open the door. "Get moving! Now!" Evelyn pulled Rosie toward the back of the house, but the girl resisted. "Not without you and Pa. Your father can handle—" The front window exploded inward. Glass flew everywhere. A burning torch landed on the floor, catching the rug immediately. "Callahan!" Pike's voice rang out from the yard. "You got one chance. Come out and we'll talk. Stay inside and burn." Wade fired through the broken window. Someone screamed. "Guess that's your answer," Pike shouted back. "Boys, light it up." More torches arced through the night. One hit the porch. Another crashed through the kitchen window. The house was burning. They had minutes at best. Wade grabbed Evelyn's arm. "The root cellar, all of you. I'll hold them off." "You can't—" "Go!" But before Evelyn could move, she saw something that froze her blood. Caleb running toward the barn with a bucket, trying to save the horses trapped inside. "Caleb!" Wade's scream tore through the chaos. "Get back here!" The boy didn't hear, or didn't listen. He disappeared into the smoke, and the barn's roof groaned like a dying thing. Wade ran. Evelyn had never seen anyone move that fast. He was across the yard and into the barn before she could even process what was happening. Gunfire erupted. Pike's men were shooting at everything that moved. "Miss Mercer!" Rosie was pulling at her hand. "We have to hide!" But Evelyn couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare at the burning barn and wait for Wade and Caleb to emerge. The roof collapsed with a roar like the end of the world. Evelyn screamed. And then, through the smoke and flames and chaos, two figures stumbled out of the inferno. Wade, his shirt on fire, carrying an unconscious Caleb over his shoulder. Behind them, the barn was nothing but flames and falling timber. Evelyn ran. She reached them as Wade collapsed to his knees, still holding his son. His back was burned, bleeding, but Caleb was breathing. "Get him to safety," Wade gasped. "I have to—" "You have to live," Evelyn said fiercely. She grabbed Caleb under the arms. "Rosie, help me." Together, they dragged the boy toward the root cellar. Behind them, Pike's men were advancing, probably thinking they'd won. They hadn't counted on the fact that a cornered animal fights hardest. Wade stood. Somehow, burned and bleeding and half dead on his feet, Wade Callahan stood. He raised his rifle, and he started firing. Every shot Wade fired found its mark. Pike's men scattered like rabbits, diving behind the water trough, the wagon, anything that might stop a bullet. One went down screaming, clutching his leg. Another dropped his rifle and ran outright. Evelyn got Caleb and Rosie into the root cellar, the cool darkness a shocking contrast to the inferno outside. The boy was breathing but unconscious, a gash on his forehead bleeding steadily. "Stay with him," Evelyn told Rosie. "Don't come out no matter what you hear." "Where are you going?" "To help your father." She grabbed the spare rifle from the cellar wall. Wade had stashed weapons everywhere, prepared for exactly this, and climbed back out into hell. The house was fully engulfed now, flames reaching toward the sky like desperate hands. The heat was intense enough that Evelyn's skin felt like it might blister just from being near it. Through the smoke, she could see Wade still standing in the yard, firing methodically at shapes in the darkness. He was going to die out there. Not if she had anything to say about it. Evelyn raised the rifle and aimed at a figure creeping around the side of the burning house. She'd practiced this. Knew the weight, the kick, the slight pull to the left that Wade had showed her how to compensate for. She fired. The man yelped and dove for cover. She'd missed killing him, thank God for that, but she'd hit close enough to make him think twice about advancing. "Evelyn," Wade's voice was raw, "get back in the cellar." Not happening. She fired again, this time at a rider trying to circle around behind Wade. The shot went wide, but the horse spooked, throwing its rider hard into the mud. Pike's voice cut through the chaos. "Callahan, this is your last chance. Give up and I'll let the women and children walk away." "Go to hell, Vernon. Have it your way." The gunfire intensified. Bullets thudded into the ground around them, splintered what was left of the porch, whined past close enough that Evelyn felt the air move. She and Wade worked in tandem without needing to speak. When he reloaded, she covered. When her rifle clicked empty, he stepped up. They were outnumbered 5-1, trapped in a burning ranch with one unconscious child and one terrified little girl hiding underground. And they were holding. Then she heard hoofbeats. More riders coming from the north. Reinforcements. They were finished. Evelyn looked at Wade, saw him realize the same thing. Saw him glance toward the root cellar where his children were hidden. Saw him make the calculation every parent dreads. How much time did he have to get them out before the end came? The new riders crested the ridge. But the shots they fired weren't aimed at Wade. They were shooting at Pike's men. Evelyn's brain couldn't process it fast enough. Through the smoke and firelight, she saw familiar faces. Carl Henderson on a gray mare. Kate Morrison's husband Jack on a roan, his face set in grim determination. Thomas Hendricks and his brother. The widow Campbell. Even old Pete Riordan, who could barely sit a horse anymore. A dozen ranchers. Maybe more. All armed. All firing at Vernon Pike's crew. "What the hell?" Wade lowered his rifle, staring. Carl Henderson rode up, his horse dancing sideways from the flames. "You didn't think we'd let you fight alone, did you? How did you—" "My brother got word out," Thomas Hendricks called from his position behind the water trough. "Told everyone what you were planning, what Pike was really doing. Folks got tired of being scared." Pike's men were retreating now, caught between Wade's position and the newcomers. 2 were already wounded. The others looked ready to run. Vernon Pike himself sat his horse in the middle of the chaos, his face purple with rage. "This is my valley," he screamed. "Mine! You people don't get to—" "Shut up, Vernon." Kate Morrison's voice was clear and cold. She had a rifle pointed directly at him. "For once in your miserable life, just shut up." "You can't do this. I'll have the sheriff—" "The sheriff saw the ledgers," Carl Henderson interrupted. "Saw what you've been doing. He's waiting in town to arrest you. Only question is whether you ride in alive or dead." Pike looked around at the circle of rifles aimed at him, at his men, scattered and beaten, at his empire crumbling in real time. "This isn't over," he said, but the words lacked conviction. Yeah, Wade said quietly, stepping forward. It is. Pike's hand moved toward his gun. 3 rifles fired simultaneously. Evelyn wasn't sure whose bullet hit him, maybe all of them. Pike toppled from his saddle like a sack of grain and didn't move. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Carl Henderson dismounted and walked over to check the body. He looked up at the assembled crowd and nodded once. It's done. Someone let out a shaky breath. Someone else started crying. The widow Campbell sat down hard in the mud like her legs had given out. Wade turned to Evelyn, his face streaked with soot and blood. The kids, safe. In the cellar. Caleb's hurt but breathing. He closed his eyes briefly, swaying on his feet. Now that the fight was over, the adrenaline draining away, his burns were catching up with him. Evelyn caught his arm. Easy, let's get you sitting down. House is gone. She looked at what had been their home. The fire was still burning, but there was nothing left to save. 4 months of her life. Every small comfort she'd built. The books. Her mother's cameo. All of it, ash. We're alive, she said. That's what matters. Wade looked at her like she'd said something profound instead of stating the obvious. Then he pitched forward, and she barely caught him before he hit the ground. Help! She screamed. Somebody help me! Carl and Jack were there instantly, taking Wade's weight. They carried him to the one structure still standing, the chicken coop, ironically, and laid him on the ground as gently as possible. Evelyn ran to the root cellar and found Rosie still holding vigil over her brother. Pa? The girl asked tremulously. Alive. Hurt, but alive. Can you stay with Caleb a little longer? Is it over? Yes, sweetheart, it's over. Rosie nodded, her small face serious beyond her years. Evelyn kissed her forehead and climbed back out. Kate Morrison had materialized with medical supplies. Where she'd gotten them, Evelyn had no idea. Together they worked on Wade's burns by lamplight, cleaning the wounds as best they could, wrapping them in clean cloth. He was unconscious through most of it, which was probably a mercy. The burns on his back were bad. Not fatal, she didn't think, but bad enough that he'd carry the scars forever. He saved Caleb, Evelyn said to no one in particular. Of course he did, Kate said matter-of-factly. He's their father. What else would he do? He could have died. So could you, but you ran out there anyway. Kate tied off a bandage with practiced efficiency. Love makes people stupid. Makes them brave, too, sometimes. Hard to tell the difference. Evelyn's hand stilled. I don't... Please, I've got eyes. Kate's smile was gentle. Question is whether you're going to do something about it or keep pretending. Before Evelyn could answer, Caleb appeared at her elbow. He was upright, conscious, one side of his face swollen and purple, but otherwise intact. Is Pa going to make it? Yes. He's strong. He'll heal. And you? You hurt? The question surprised her. No, I'm fine. You sure? Because you got blood on your dress and you're shaking. Evelyn looked down. He was right on both counts. The blood wasn't hers, probably Wade's, maybe Caleb's, but she was definitely shaking. Reaction setting in, her body finally catching up with everything that had just happened. I'm fine, she repeated, but her voice cracked on the words. Caleb, 14 years old and trying so hard to be a man, put his arms around her. Thank you for not leaving us, he whispered. And then Evelyn was crying, really crying, for the first time since Boston. Not quiet, dignified tears, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Caleb held on tight, and Kate rubbed her back, and somewhere in the ruins of the ranch, Rosie started crying too. They stood there in the wreckage of their home and cried together until there was nothing left. The valley helped rebuild. It started at dawn the next day when Carl Henderson showed up with lumber and tools. By noon, a dozen families had arrived with supplies, labor, and enough food to feed an army. By sunset, they'd cleared the burned wreckage and laid the foundation for a new barn. Wade watched from a makeshift bed in the chicken coop, too injured to help, but too stubborn to stay quiet. You're doing it wrong, he yelled at Jack Morrison. That beam needs to be centered. Wade, shut up, Evelyn called back. Let the man work. It's crooked, then he'll fix it. Stop micromanaging. Despite everything, people laughed. The sound was strange and wonderful after so much fear. They camped in the yard that night. Nobody wanted to leave the Callahans alone yet. Someone produced a fiddle. Someone else had whiskey. They passed bottles and told stories and pretended for a few hours that the world was safe. Evelyn sat beside Wade's bed, checking his bandages in the firelight. "This is strange," he said quietly. "What is?" "Having people help. Not because they owe me, just because they want to. You stood up to Pike when everyone else was too scared. You earned this." "We earned it. You're the one who got those ledgers, who convinced people they could fight back." "We did it together." Wade caught her hand, his grip weak but deliberate. "Yeah, we did." Their eyes held. Around them, people were singing, laughing, being alive in the way you only could after surviving something terrible. "Evelyn, Wade, I need to tell you something." She took a breath. "When I thought you were going to die in that barn, when I couldn't see you through the smoke, I realized—" "Miss Mercer!" Rosie came running up, breathless. "Mrs. Campbell says she can teach me to make apple pie. Can I go help her?" Evelyn released Wade's hand like it burned. "Of course, sweetheart. Go ahead." Rosie ran off, oblivious to what she'd interrupted. Wade was still looking at Evelyn. "You realized what?" "Nothing. It can wait. Evelyn, get some rest. You need to heal." She stood before he could argue and walked away into the darkness beyond the firelight. She could feel his eyes on her back the whole way. The new house went up faster than seemed possible. It wasn't fancy. Just 4 walls, a roof, and enough space for them to sleep out of the weather. But it was theirs, built with their own hands and the help of people who'd decided the Callahans were worth fighting for. Wade healed slowly. The burns scabbed over, then scarred. He couldn't lift his arms above his shoulders for weeks, couldn't ride for a month. It made him irritable and impossible, snapping at everyone and hating his own weakness. Evelyn bore it with patience she didn't know she had. "You're being insufferable," she told him one afternoon when he'd complained for the 10th time about the new barn's roof pitch. "I'm being accurate." "You're being a jackass." "Same thing." She threw a dish rag at him. He caught it one-handed and almost smiled. "You're not a very good nurse. And you're not a very good patient. We're even." The almost smile became real. "Fair enough." These small moments of peace felt stolen, precious, like something that might disappear if they acknowledged it too directly. But the valley was changing around them. With Pike gone and his hold on the territory broken, people started breathing easier. Debts were forgiven. Water rights were renegotiated fairly. The cattlemen's meeting that had been scheduled before the attack went ahead, but instead of Pike's intimidation, it was an actual cooperative discussion. Red Hollow started feeling less like a place where desperate people hid and more like a community, and Evelyn found herself at the center of it without meaning to. Women came to her for advice, for help reading contracts, for someone to talk to who understood what it meant to be scared and powerless and find strength anyway. She started teaching again, not just Rosie and Caleb, but any child whose parents wanted them educated. They met in the Hendersons' barn at first, then moved to the church basement when the congregation offered it. "You're making a difference," Kate Morrison told her one afternoon. "A real one. I'm just teaching reading and writing." "You're teaching people they're worth more than what men like Pike told them they were. That's bigger than reading." Evelyn didn't know what to do with that, didn't know how to accept that she mattered in a way that went beyond just surviving. 2 months after the fire, Wade was finally well enough to ride again. He saddled his horse at dawn without telling anyone where he was going. Evelyn watched from the window, fighting the urge to ask. He was a grown man. He didn't need her permission. He came back at sunset with something wrapped in burlap. "What's that?" Caleb asked. "Something I needed to get." Wade dismounted stiffly and carried the bundle inside. He set it on the table and unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a wooden sign, freshly carved and painted. It read, "Callahan Ranch." "Figured it was time we made it official," Wade said gruffly. "This is our land, our home. About time we claimed it proper." Caleb grinned. Rosie clapped her hands. Evelyn felt something warm and dangerous expanding in her chest. "Where did you get it?" she asked. "Made it. Been working on it when I couldn't sleep." He glanced at her. "Thought you might like to help me put it up tomorrow. All of us together." It wasn't a grand gesture, wasn't a declaration, just a simple invitation to be part of something permanent. "I'd like that," Evelyn said quietly. That night, After the children were asleep, Wade found her on the porch again. Same place they'd sat months ago when everything was falling apart. But the house behind them was whole now. The barn was rebuilt. The valley felt different. "Can't sleep?" he asked, thinking too much. "About what?" Evelyn considered lying, considered deflecting. Instead, she told the truth. "About how long I can stay." Wade went very still. "That a question or a statement?" "I don't know yet." "Why wouldn't you stay?" "Because people are talking, Wade. About us. About what it means that I live here. That we're not married, but we're—" She trailed off, not sure how to finish. "We're what?" "I don't know. What are we?" The question hung between them like smoke. Wade was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "I'm not good at this. Talking about feelings. Claire used to say I had the emotional range of a fence post." She wasn't wrong. That surprised a laugh out of him. "No, she wasn't." He sobered. "But I'm going to try anyway, because you deserve that much." He turned to face her fully. "When you first got here, I thought you'd last maybe a week. Figured you were just another Boston lady playing at Frontier Life. Then you'd realize how hard it was and run back east. I thought about it. I know. But you didn't. You stayed through everything Pike threw at us. Stayed when the ranch burned. Stayed when any sane person would have left." He took a breath. "You became part of this family without either of us meaning for it to happen." "Wade, let me finish. Please." He reached for her hand. This time his grip was steady, strong. "I loved my wife. Loved her more than I thought I could love anyone. When she died, I thought that was it. Thought I'd had my chance at happiness and lost it." Evelyn's throat was tight. "Then you showed up with your fancy education and your stubborn pride and your absolute refusal to quit. And you made me feel things I thought were dead. Made me want things I thought I was too old and broken to want anymore." "What things?" "A future. A partner. Someone who stands with me instead of behind me." He cupped her face with his free hand. "You, Evelyn. I want you." She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the warmth of his hand and the weight of words she'd never expected to hear. "I know I'm not easy," Wade continued. "Know I'm harsh and stubborn and not much for talking. Know I come with 2 kids and a ranch that needs constant work and scars that'll never fully heal. But if you'll have me, if you'll stay not as the teacher but as my wife, I swear I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of it." "Wade, You don't have to answer now. Think about it. Take all the time you need." He started to pull away. Evelyn caught his hand and held on. "I don't need time." His eyes searched hers. "No? I stopped running the day I pointed a rifle at Vernon Pike. Stopped pretending I could keep myself separate from this place, these people, this family." She stood, pulling him up with her. "I love your children. I love this valley. And I love you, Wade Callahan, even though you're stubborn and impossible and have all the emotional sensitivity of a rock." That's a hell of a proposal acceptance. "You asked, didn't you?" "Guess I did." He kissed her then. Slow and careful, like she might break, like he was afraid this was a dream. Evelyn kissed him back and proved she was real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wade pressed his forehead to hers. "We're going to scandalize the whole valley." "We already did. Might as well make it official." He laughed, actually laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "Yeah, might as well." They stood there on the porch as the stars wheeled overhead and the valley settled into sleep around them. Tomorrow they'd tell the children. Tomorrow they'd start planning a wedding. Tomorrow the work would continue because ranches didn't run themselves and life didn't pause for happiness. But tonight, for this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Inside the house, Rosie peeked out her window and saw them standing together. She smiled, satisfied that the world had finally arranged itself properly, and went back to bed. In his room, Caleb heard voices and laughter and felt something tight in his chest release. His father sounded happy, really happy, for the first time in years. That was enough. The wedding took place on a Sunday in September when the valley was painted gold and red with early autumn. They held it outside because no building in Red Hollow was big enough for everyone who wanted to attend. Half the territory showed up. Ranchers who'd fought beside them. Families who'd helped rebuild. Even the new sheriff from Billings, who wanted to meet the woman who'd brought down Vernon Pike with nothing but ledgers and nerve. Evelyn wore a dress Kate Morrison had sewn, simple blue cotton with lace at the collar. Wade wore his best shirt and looked uncomfortable but determined. Caleb stood beside his father as best man, gangly and proud. Rosie was so excited she could barely stand still. Carl Henderson officiated, reading from a battered Bible his mother had carried west. The words were traditional, familiar, but they felt new when applied to two people who'd earned each other through fire and blood. "Do you, Wade Callahan, take this woman?" "I do." Carl hadn't finished the question. People laughed. "Let me finish, Wade." "Don't need you to. Answer's still yes." More laughter. Evelyn was trying not to cry. "And do you, Evelyn Mercer, take this man?" "Yes, absolutely yes." "You two are terrible at this." "We're terrible at a lot of things," Evelyn said, looking at Wade. "But we're good at not quitting." Carl gave up on formal language and just smiled. "Then by the power vested in me by the Montana Territory and common sense, I declare you married. Wade, kiss your wife before she changes her mind." Wade did. The valley erupted in cheers. That night, after the dancing and drinking and celebrating finally wound down, they sat together on the porch of their rebuilt home. Married. Partners. A family made official by words and witnesses. "You happy?" Wade asked. Evelyn considered it. Thought about Boston, about the life she'd fled, about the woman she'd been when she stepped off that stagecoach 6 months ago, broken, scared, convinced she had nothing left to lose. Then she thought about the woman she'd become. The teacher, the fighter, the wife, the mother to children who needed her. "Yeah," she said finally. "I think I am." Wade pulled her close. They sat there as the stars came out and the valley settled around them, and for the first time in either of their lives, the future felt like something to look forward to instead of something to survive. Inside, Caleb and Rosie were already asleep, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would come and their family would still be there. And in Red Hollow, people would talk for years about the Boston schoolteacher who came west looking for work and found something better. Found herself. Found home. Found love in the last place anyone expected. But that was all just talk. The truth was simpler. The truth was two broken people who refused to quit, who stood together when the world tried to tear them apart, who built something real out of ashes and stubbornness and a shared refusal to accept defeat. The truth was survival, growth, transformation. The truth was life, messy and hard and worth every single second. Marriage didn't fix everything. Evelyn learned that within the first week when she and Wade had their first real fight as husband and wife over something as stupid as where to store the winter potatoes. He wanted them in the old root cellar. She thought the new storage shed made more sense. They argued for 20 minutes before Caleb finally interrupted. "Just put half in each place and whoever's right can gloat about it in spring." They'd stared at him, then at each other, and started laughing at the absurdity of it all. "We're idiots," Wade said. "Speak for yourself," Evelyn replied, but she was smiling. The potatoes went in both places. Come spring, the root cellar ones lasted longer, but Wade had the grace not to mention it more than once a week. Life settled into rhythms that felt both strange and natural. Wade worked the ranch with Caleb, teaching his son everything about cattle and horses and reading the weather. Evelyn taught school 3 days a week in town, the rest of the time helping with ranch work and raising Rosie. They fell into bed exhausted most nights, sometimes too tired even to talk, but they were building something together, something that felt solid. But the valley hadn't forgotten Vernon Pike. His death had left a power vacuum that made some people nervous. The first hint of trouble came in October when a stranger showed up at their door. He was well-dressed, clean-shaven, and carried himself like a man used to being obeyed. His name was Marcus Stillwell, and he claimed to be Pike's cousin from back east. "I've come to settle Vernon's affairs," he explained, standing in their yard like he owned it, including some outstanding business with this ranch. Wade's expression went carefully neutral. "What business?" "Vernon held notes on several properties in this valley, legal debts that need collecting. Pike's dead. His debts died with him." "I'm afraid that's not how the law works, Mr. Callahan." Stillwell produced a sheaf of papers. "These debts were witnessed and notarized. They transfer to his estate, which I now manage." Evelyn stepped up beside Wade. She'd learned to read legal documents in the months since Pike's death, had made it her business to understand exactly how men like him twisted the law to their advantage. "May I see those?" Stillwell handed them over with a condescending smile. "Of course, Mrs. Callahan, though I doubt you'll find anything amiss. Everything is perfectly legal." She read carefully, Wade watching her face for any reaction. The papers looked official. They claimed Wade owed Pike $3,000 for cattle purchased 2 years ago, with interest accruing monthly. It was complete fiction. "This is forged," Evelyn said flatly. "I beg your pardon? The signature isn't Wade's. The date is wrong. We have receipts proving these cattle were paid for in full. And the witness listed here?" She pointed to a name. "He died in 1884. Hard for a dead man to witness a contract from 1885. Stillwell's smile faded. "You're mistaken." "I'm not. And if you push this, I'll take it to the territorial court with evidence of fraud. Again, just like we did with your cousin's water rights schemes." She handed the papers back. "Tell whoever sent you that Red Hollow doesn't scare easy anymore." The man's pleasant facade cracked, showing something uglier underneath. "You think killing Vernon solved your problems? He had friends, powerful friends. They won't let some frontier nobody and his schoolteacher wife stand in their way." Wade moved so fast, Stillwell didn't have time to react. He grabbed the man by his fancy coat and lifted him onto his toes. "You threatened my wife again," Wade said quietly, "and they'll be fishing what's left of you out of the creek. We clear?" "You can't—" "We clear?" Stillwell swallowed hard. "Yes." Wade dropped him. The man stumbled, caught himself, and practically ran to his horse. He rode off without looking back, his dignity in tatters. Caleb came out of his barn, rifle in hand. "That gonna be a problem, Pa?" "Probably." Wade watched Stillwell disappear over the ridge. "But it's one we can handle." Evelyn wasn't so sure. That night, she lay awake listening to the wind rattle the windows and wondering if they'd ever be free of men like Vernon Pike. If violence attracted more violence until there was nothing left but blood and revenge. Wade was awake too. She could tell by his breathing. "You thinking about Stillwell?" she asked quietly. "Yeah." "You think he'll come back?" "Him or someone like him. Pike had connections, money, people who benefited from his operation." Wade rolled over to face her. "I won't let them take this from us. Won't let them hurt you or the kids." "I know. But I'm tired, Evelyn. Tired of fighting. Tired of watching the horizon for the next threat." She reached for his hand in the darkness. "Then maybe we don't wait for them to come to us. Maybe we go on the offensive." "What do you mean?" "Pike kept records. We have copies. What if we sent them to the territorial government, to newspapers in Helena and Butte? Made it public not just here, but everywhere." She squeezed his hand. "Expose the whole network. Every politician he bribed, every official he owned, burn it all down." Wade was quiet for a long moment. "That's dangerous. Could make us targets for every corrupt bastard between here and Washington." "We're already targets. At least this way we'd be targets who fought back." "You really want to do this?" Evelyn thought about it. Thought about spending the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, raising children in fear, wondering when the next Vernon Pike would show up. "Yes," she said finally. "I want to do this." "Then we do it together." They spent the next month gathering evidence. Thomas Hendricks brought more documents his brother had copied. Carl Henderson contributed testimony about forced land sales. Kate Morrison provided names of other women whose husbands had been threatened or hurt by Pike's organization. It was slow, tedious work, but piece by piece, they built a case that was impossible to ignore. In November, Evelyn took the train to Helena with a trunk full of documents and a letter of introduction from the new sheriff. She met with a territorial prosecutor named Sarah Weaver, who'd built a reputation for going after corrupt land speculators. Weaver read through the evidence with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. "This is explosive," she said finally. "You understand what you're handing me? This implicates state senators, judges, half the land office." "I understand." "They'll come after you, after everyone involved. They're already coming after us. This just means we're swinging back." Weaver smiled grimly. "I like you, Mrs. Callahan." "All right. I'll open an investigation, but I need you to testify, publicly, in court." "When?" January, maybe February. We'll need time to build the case properly. She looked at Evelyn seriously. This won't be easy. They'll try to discredit you, call you a liar, a troublemaker, drag your name through the mud. Let them try. And they did. The attack started before Evelyn even made it back to Red Hollow. The territorial newspaper ran a story calling her a radical agitator trying to destroy Montana's business interests. Anonymous letters arrived at the ranch accusing her of everything from adultery to theft. Someone spray-painted "whore" on the side of their new barn. Wade found her scrubbing it off one morning, her face set in grim determination. "Leave it," he said. "I'll handle it." "No. They want me to feel ashamed? They want me to hide?" She scrubbed harder. "I won't give them the satisfaction." "Evelyn, I mean it, Wade. I'm done being quiet. Done letting people like Pike and Stillwell and whoever sent these letters think they can intimidate me into silence." He took the brush from her hands gently. "Then let me help." They cleaned the barn together while Caleb and Rosie watched from the porch. When they were done, Wade stepped back and surveyed their work. "We should paint something new there, something that matters." "Like what?" He thought for a moment. Then he smiled. "How about Callahan Ranch, where cowards ain't welcome?" Despite everything, Evelyn laughed. "That's terrible." "I know, but it's true." They settled for repainting the barn its original red and getting on with their lives. The school board tried to fire Evelyn in December. They called a special meeting and voted 3-2 that her controversial activities made her unsuitable for teaching children. She stood in front of them in the church basement and fought back. "Controversial activities," she repeated. "You mean standing up to corruption? Teaching children that the law should apply equally to everyone? Or is it that I'm a woman who won't stay quiet when men try to silence her?" "Mrs. Callahan, your attitude, my attitude is that I'll keep teaching whether you pay me or not, whether I have a building or not, because those children deserve an education, and I'll be damned if I let politics get in the way of that." She walked out before they could respond. By the next morning, parents had organized. They showed up at the school board members' homes, their businesses, the church. Polite but firm, making it clear that if Evelyn Callahan wasn't teaching their children, nobody would be. The board reversed its decision within a week. Wade pulled her aside that night after dinner. "You're scaring people." "Good. I'm serious. You're making powerful enemies." "So are you. We both are." She touched his face gently. "But we're also making allies, real ones, people who are tired of being afraid. I worry about you." "I know. I worry about you too." She kissed him softly. "But we don't stop. We can't stop. Not now." "I love you," Wade said quietly, in case I don't say it enough. "You don't say it nearly enough. I love you." "Better." January brought the trial. Evelyn testified for 3 days straight. The defense attorneys tried everything, attacking her credibility, her marriage, her background. They brought up her father's debts in Boston, suggested she was lying to cover her own financial crimes, called her an opportunist who'd seduced a grieving widower for his property. She sat in the witness box and answered every question with calm precision. "Yes, my father died in debtor's prison. Yes, I came west with nothing. Yes, I married Wade Callahan. None of that changes the documents in front of you. None of that changes the fact that Vernon Pike ran a criminal enterprise that destroyed lives across this territory." The prosecutor, Sarah Weaver, was brilliant. She systematically dismantled the defense's arguments, presented the evidence clearly, and made it impossible to ignore the scope of Pike's corruption. When the jury came back after 2 days of deliberation, the foreman stood and read the verdict. On the charge of racketeering, guilty. On the charge of bribery, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to defraud, guilty. The courtroom erupted. Pike's associates would face prison. The officials he'd bribed would be removed from office. His entire network was coming down. Evelyn sat in the gallery and felt Wade's hand find hers. "We won," she whispered. "You won. This was all you." "No. This was us. All of us." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Evelyn gave a brief statement about justice and courage and standing up for what's right. Wade said nothing, just stood beside her, looking uncomfortable with all the attention. On the train back to Red Hollow, they sat in companionable silence while the landscape rolled past. Montana in winter was still harsh and unforgiving, but it was home now. Their home. What happens now? Wade asked. Now we go back to the ranch, raise cattle, teach school, live our lives. That simple? That's simple. It wasn't, of course. Life never was. But over the next year, something shifted in the valley. With Pike's organization dismantled and his associates in prison, people started breathing easier, started rebuilding, started trusting each other again. The Callahan Ranch became a gathering place. Families stopped by on Sundays for dinner. Ranchers came to Wade for advice on herd management. Women sought out Evelyn to talk about everything from difficult marriages to dreams of their own education. Caleb turned 15 and started courting Henderson's daughter, a smart girl named Emma who could outride most of the boys. Rosie bloomed into a confident child who asked 1,000 questions and believed she could do anything. Wade slowly learned to relax, to trust that disaster wasn't always waiting around the corner. And Evelyn found something she'd never expected to find: peace. One evening in late spring, she sat on the porch watching the sunset behind the mountains. The valley was painted gold and green, the air sweet with growing things. From inside the house came laughter, Caleb teasing Rosie about something, Wade telling them both to settle down. Kate Morrison rode up, her children trailing behind on their own horses. "Thought I'd find you out here," Kate said, dismounting. "You got time for coffee?" "Always." They sat together while the children ran off to explore. Kate had left her husband for good after he started drinking again, had taken her kids and moved to a small place near town. She was making it work through sheer determination and help from the community. "You ever regret it?" Kate asked. "Coming here? All the fighting and the hardship?" Evelyn considered the question seriously. "No, I regret a lot of things, mostly mistakes I made along the way. But not coming here, not staying, this place made me who I needed to be." "Which is what?" "Someone who doesn't quit. Someone who fights back. Someone who matters." Kate smiled. "You always mattered, Evelyn. You just didn't know it yet. Maybe that was true. Maybe all of this, the journey west, the confrontation with Pike, the trial, the building of a new life, had just been about learning to see herself clearly, to understand that worth wasn't something other people granted. It was something you claimed." Wade came out with coffee for all of them. He'd gotten better at small hospitalities, at making people feel welcome. He sat on the step next to Evelyn, his shoulder touching hers, solid and warm. "Kids are getting into the pie," he reported. "Let them," Evelyn said. "Kate made too." Smart woman. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the valley settle into twilight. This was what they'd fought for, not just survival, not just victory over enemies, but this: quiet moments with friends, children playing safely, a home that felt like it would last. In the years that followed, Red Hollow changed. More families moved in, drawn by stories of a valley where ordinary people had stood up to corruption and won. A real school was built, with Evelyn as the head teacher and 2 assistants she trained herself. The church expanded, businesses opened and actually thrived instead of just scraping by. Wade's ranch prospered. He and Caleb ran cattle across land that was finally, legally, undisputedly theirs. They hired hands, good men who worked hard and were paid fairly, built a reputation for honest dealing that spread across the territory. Rosie grew into a young woman who wanted to be a doctor. Everyone said it was impossible, that medical schools didn't accept women. Evelyn helped her apply anyway. When the rejections came, they applied to more schools. And more. Until finally, one said yes. The day Rosie left for medical school in Philadelphia, Wade cried. Not dramatically, not openly, just quiet tears he tried to hide while hugging his daughter goodbye. "I'm so proud of you," he told her. "Your ma would be so proud." "I know, Pa." Rosie hugged him tight. "Thank you for letting me go. Thank Evelyn. She's the one who convinced me you could do anything you set your mind to." After Rosie left, the house felt emptier. Caleb had married Emma Henderson the year before and moved to their own place down the valley. It was just Wade and Evelyn now, rattling around in a house built for a family. "Strange, isn't it?" Wade said one night. "Spent years raising them, worrying about them. Now they're gone and we did our job too well." "That's not a bad thing." "Didn't say it was, just strange." He pulled her closer. "Means we get you all to myself now." "Is that what you want?" It's exactly what I want. They were older now. Gray was creeping into Wade's dark hair. Evelyn's hands were no longer smooth but calloused from years of work. They bore scars. Wade's burns from the fire, Evelyn's from a kitchen accident, both from a life fully lived. But they were happy. Not the breathless happiness of new love, the steady, earned happiness of two people who'd chosen each other every day for years, who'd fought together, built together, survived together. On their 10th anniversary, Wade gave her a gift. It was a book, leather-bound, expensive. Inside, the title page read, "The History of Red Hollow Valley" by Evelyn Callahan. She stared at it confused. "I don't understand." "You're always telling stories about how things used to be, about Pike, the fire, the trial. People listen." Wade smiled. "Thought you should write it down, make it official." "I'm not a writer." "You're a teacher, that's close enough." She did write it, spent the next 2 years interviewing everyone who'd been part of those early days. Carl Henderson, who'd stood with them against Pike. Kate Morrison, who'd found her courage in their example. Thomas Hendricks and his brother. The widow Campbell. Even Jack Morrison, sober now and trying to make amends. She wrote about the fear and the fighting, about what it took to stand up when standing up meant risking everything, about the cost of courage and the value of community. The book was published by a small press in Helena. It sold modestly, mostly in Montana. But people read it, used it in schools, quoted it in newspapers when talking about frontier justice and the role of ordinary people in building civilization. Evelyn didn't write it for fame. She wrote it so people would remember, so the children of Red Hollow would know what their parents and grandparents had done, so the story wouldn't be lost. Years turned into decades. Caleb and Emma had 4 children who grew up strong and loud and loved. Rosie became a doctor and came back to Montana to practice, setting up a clinic in Billings that served patients regardless of their ability to pay. She never married, said she was too busy saving lives to bother with romance, and seemed completely content with that choice. Wade and Evelyn grew old together on the ranch they'd fought so hard to keep. They moved slower now, ached more, forgot things occasionally, but they still sat on the porch in the evenings, still argued about stupid things, still found ways to make each other laugh. One evening, when Evelyn was 63 and Wade was 68, they sat watching their grandchildren play in the yard. The mountains were purple in the failing light. The valley spread out before them like a promise kept. "You ever think about Boston?" Wade asked. "Sometimes, but not the way I used to." "What way then?" "I used to think about it like a place I'd failed, a life I'd lost." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Now I think about it as the place I had to leave to find out who I was supposed to be." "And who was that?" "Someone strong enough to stay, someone brave enough to fight, someone who could love a stubborn rancher and his broken family and help put them all back together." Wade kissed the top of her head. "We put each other back together." "Yeah, I guess we did." They sat in silence for a while, watching the children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. Inside the house, dinner was waiting. Tomorrow there would be work to do, lessons to teach, a ranch to run, the same rhythm they'd followed for 30 years. "You happy?" Wade asked, the same question he'd asked on their wedding night so long ago. Evelyn thought about the girl who'd stepped off the stagecoach in Red Hollow, carrying nothing but grief and desperation. Thought about everything she'd survived, everything she'd built, everyone she'd become. "Yeah," she said, "I really am." And she meant it, because happiness wasn't about perfect circumstances or easy lives. Happiness was about choosing to stay when things got hard, about finding people worth fighting for, about building something that lasted longer than fear. Happiness was a ranch in Montana. A man who'd learned to say, "I love you," more than once a year. Children who'd grown into good people. A valley that had transformed from a place of terror into a community of hope. Happiness was earned through blood and sweat and stubbornness. Through refusing to quit even when quitting made sense. Through believing that courage was contagious and that one person standing up could inspire others to do the same. The sun set behind the mountains. The children came inside, hungry and laughing. Wade stood and offered Evelyn his hand, pulling her up with a strength that belied his age. "Come on," he said. "Supper's getting cold." "In a minute." She stood there a moment longer, looking out at the valley that had become her home, remembering the woman she'd been and honoring the woman she'd become. Then she took her husband's hand and went inside to the life they'd built together. The life she'd traveled 1,000 miles to find. The life that had been worth every single moment of fear and fighting and faith. The life that proved, in the end, that running away sometimes means running toward everything you were always supposed to be. And that was the truth. Red Hollow taught her, not that courage meant never being afraid, but that courage meant being afraid and doing it anyway. Meant standing up when standing up cost everything. Meant staying when every instinct screamed to run. The Valley remembered Evelyn Mercer Callahan long after she was gone. Remembered the schoolteacher who came west with nothing and changed everything. Who taught their children, fought their battles, and showed them what it meant to refuse to quit. They told her story for generations. Not because it was extraordinary, though it was, but because it was true. Because it proved that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they found something worth fighting for. And in the end, that was the only lesson that mattered. Not that life was easy or fair or kind, but that you could survive it, you could fight it, you could transform it into something beautiful if you were stubborn enough, brave enough, and lucky enough to find people who'd fight beside you. That was what Red Hollow was built on. Not money or power or perfect circumstances, but courage, community, and the absolute refusal to let fear win.
Cannon, yes.
I know, I'm just saying. It's Prego. Oh, okay. How you doing, Prego?
God, Vagar's pinging.
You're still dead?
That hit me for sure.
Bard missed the stun? You still lived somehow? Hello, world. Dude, the footage of the fucking Artemis looks like shit. I wonder if they'll have a better footage of it coming back down. Surely they have a camera set up where they think it's gonna land, right? Some kind of fucking camera. Ow.
I just need one kill, man. I can snowball.
Because I'm Native American and psychic. Exactly. I'm doing well, trying to climb as well. I don't know if you'd call what I'm doing climbing. Alright, man. I think in the current state I could kill her.
This is an FF angle for sure.
Okay. Alright. Fair enough, man.
You're not making it out the hood.
No, we're not. I don't know how I just lost, but whatever. BRB, I'm kind of down, huh? Yes, maybe next time. True. Maybe next time. Oh, you're going to sleep, Aya? Just give me one more.